Welcome back. So now we have an implementation class for the repository by using unit test and test-driven development. Now what do we want to actually use in that test setup? That's what we're going to look at now. Now we're going to be a bit more specific. Now we can always go and switch these later because of the architecture we decided. But right now, since I want to start using this MS SQL database, that's kind of my goal. We are also going to have a little bit of SQLite in here for local work, for development work, but that's kind of my goal, to start using MS SQL later on. So I'm going to try and create this using the entity framework core, which is Microsoft's way of communicating with different databases using SQL, right? So in our case, that's what we are going to do. We're going to have some kind of ORM framework. It's an object relation mapping framework, and we're going to use that to convert from C# to SQL when we kind of pass the data this way, and then when we pass the data back, we are going to convert from SQL to C# again, right? So we have a way, a framework that can help us kind of do these conversions. Now we can start discussing if that's better or worse than using pure SQL, but that's not the goal of my lessons right here, because later on I could always go and switch this into a pure SQL setup like with Dapper or something, and I think we are going to try that later on just to show you how easy it is to switch between different frameworks down here later on. We want to start writing our SQL part of the implementation, because the point is, again, I don't care if you're using SQL purely or if you're using an entity framework. All I want to kind of force you into doing is providing different methods in your implementation that kind of upholds the interface that we built in the core early on. That's the goal. I don't care how you do it. That's up to you as the kind of the data structure guy to figure out how you want to do it. And you might have some different opinions on that. Again, it's up to you. As long as the data is stored in some kind of data storage at some point and we can get the data back at some point, I as the core really don't care. Just provide me data, right? So that's what we're going to do. Now, I'm going to again do this test driven. So let's jump back to our code right here. Now, in the end, I want this to end up with a DBContext. That's just the way that the entity framework is set up. It needs a DBContext. Now, we don't have that available right now. And of course, I'm going to do a test-driven, so I'm not allowed to write this in the production code yet. I'm going to instead use Fluent Assertion again to kind of make something that's pretty neat, in my mind at least. Now, let's start by going in and creating a new test class. We could now add this in here, actually, if we wanted to, in the location repository test, but I feel that this is something that requires a new test class for this specific DBContext, because then we can also use that later on when we want to start building more into our egg production context right here. So I'm going to add a new class down here. That's going to be a new class. It's going to be egg production DBContext test, right? So this is just a new test class that I want. Now the test class is of course going to have a fact right here, and the fact is right now just going to be a simple test saying something like, I want to be sure that this is actually of the type DBContext. So I pasted in the fact right here. Now we have that available. Now next step is I'm going to just make a local context right here. Let's just make a new egg production DBContext. There we go. Now I can actually use this context and do a should on that one and say it should be assignable to. That's a pretty neat thing. You can say it should be assignable to something. That could be an interface, but in my case it's going to be should be assignable to a DBContext. Now it seems that it already knows about DBContext, but I might as well just tell you it won't really do it until we actually go and add this dependency in NuGet package. So let's add the dependency for the DBContext in the NuGet package right here. I'll go and I'll find it, and I already found it. I kind of cheated. It's called Microsoft Entity Framework Core, and I'll just add that to my project right here. Install. There we go. Now it knows about it, and we have it right here. Now the reason that it kind of knew about it is because I kind of cheated a little bit again, like I told you guys earlier. If I manage my NuGet package, you'll notice I have this mock entity framework core, and that kind of knows a little about the entity framework out of the box. But you need both to kind of do the testing properly. So I added both now. Sweet. Now the final thing I need to do is run the unit test, of course. Let's see if everything runs now, and hopefully it fails with this test I just built right here. Let's try and run this actually on its own just to be sure that that guy is run. It actually seems it's down here and it's failing right now. So let's just give you guys some space. There we go. You can see it fails because it's not of the type DBContext yet. And that makes perfect sense because my production code is not of the type DBContext. Let's try and go to the egg production code right here. And here we need to now explain to the system that that should be of the DBContext. And again, you'll notice that's not available, of course, because I haven't imported that package. Now again, you can go to add manage NuGet packages, or we can let Writer help us out and just install that entity framework to this package. There we go. Now the only thing I've done is, I'll implement it, and the only thing I've done is pretty much just say that this should be of that type, and that should mean that when I run this now, the unit test again, it should not fail anymore, because now it knows it's of the type DBContext. And again, I think the Fluent assertion helps me out a lot right here. There we go, now it's a success. It's very easy with the Fluent assertion down here to make a simple test just saying it should be assignable, it should be kind of able to is of type or cast it into a DBContext just with this single command right here. And again, I kind of guide myself that now this will always be a DBContext and I'll fail on that anymore. And also I kind of have a version right here that shows that test-driven development again works. So that's it for this lesson. See you next lesson. We'll work even more with this context. Have fun.